Well, I was living in Toronto in the 80s, and I was working as an actor in stage and doing a lot of TV stuff. I had a really raspy voice in those days because I smoked a lot and drank more than I do now. So my agent said, you know, Al, you've got to get into the voice business because there's money to be made. So she forced me to go to a studio and record a bunch of old ads, which we put on a tape and shopped around. I started getting, my first job was Biggie fries for Wendy's hamburgers, which was really inspiring. And then from there, they started sending me to, you know, all the usual auditions. And I think the first cartoon I did was Babar, you know, the elephant.
Yep.
I wasn't him, but I was somebody on the show. Then when I moved here, I found out that, you know, like for instance, Gary's an old friend of mine from the 70s. And he was doing this stuff, and my agency here started sending me out, and then I scored one, Conan the Barbarian. I was Falconer, the guy who can fly. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but wind, fill my wings, you know. And from there, I started doing other cartoons, and I'd have to say the highlight, of course, of all of this has been Beast Wars. You know. That one really stuck to the wall, so to speak. Well, you see, doing a prelay whereby you record the voices before you animate is similar to doing radio plays, which I've also done because the CBC, even though it's a cheesy network and steals money off the Canadian public, they do radio plays, and it's a beautiful environment. You have however many actors, 6, 8, however many in the cast, standing in a circle, pointing towards the middle, speaking into microphones, and emoting. And when you have everybody there, it's, well, I guess you could imagine it's like being in the 40s on a radio show where everybody's throwing everything into the middle. It sounds corny, but it's a really creative situation.
Cool.
And, you know, lots of laughs. I mean, just a lot of fun. A lot of fun. Well, I mean, you know, just the usual hijinks, spitballs, and that kind of thing. I mean, nothing major. Because, of course, you know, time is money, and the fun thing about causing trouble in the studio is that you get scolded just like you're in grade 2, you know, like, okay, we've got to get back to work now, and it's all very sort of regressive in a positive kind of way. It's like being 12 again, you know, grown-up people being scolded. It's just fantastic. Susan Blu directed most of the episodes, I guess, and, well, no, I mean, she's just a dynamo. And, you know, the kind of person that, of course, she's flown up from L.A. for the few days, so she's like, let's go. You know, let's get this thing so I can get back to my nice place in L.A. And so generally the whole thing was, you know, the integrity of the work aspect was always there, of course. But with lots of room to allow your imagination to flow, and of course that always leads to somebody throwing a spitball. You know, so. I always liked Cheetor, but it's because I like Ian, you know, like he's just this nice guy. But I always liked Cheetor because I didn't think he got, you know, like, he should have been able to go to a party and get really smashed out of his mind like a teenager would. And that's a stupid thing to say, but I always felt he had it in him to, you know, have more fun. Because Ian himself is a very hilarious guy. You know, and the character was so straight and sort of white bread. Or if an animal like that can be white bread, I mean, he was a bit sort of straight, you know, but that's why I liked him. And of course, Rat Trap was just a beautiful sort of Art Carney type, you know, characterization, and Scotty's a fantastic artist who I admire and respect very much. Well, I remember the audition was just excruciating, of course, because, you know, he has a kind of pinched voice where he's right up in here. And, of course, they kept asking me to go higher and higher. And what often happens is you reach a point where you can enact something once, and then they go, oh, that's it, that's it. And you're like, you know, at a point where you're dying, and then they say, well, do that lots, you know. And that's essentially what it was all about, just really straining. Well, you see, that's the interesting thing about doing this kind of work, because it really involves only this much of your entire body, and yet the pictures, of course, reveal full-bodied figures. So that's where the imagination and just the sheer energy that you've got to display comes into play. So, I mean, acting things out actually somehow comes through onto the, the little tape, you know, even though you're not there. The physicality of what you're doing does translate through audio. I mean, it's just a fact. Like, for instance, if we did it sitting down, then, like, every now and again somebody would try and do their episode sitting down. You know, oh, I'm going to sit down this week, you know. And then it just comes out flat. So then the director would say, well, would you mind standing up? And then you do, and all of a sudden, everything's invested with, you know, a really strong energy. And that's what it's all about. Well, yeah, because he seemed to get smarter as the episodes went along. So there was a development that you could actually see. I mean, he wasn't fully formed, and all of a sudden he starts thinking, "Hey, wait a minute. Maybe I can get in here. Maybe I can actually take over and, you know, take over the whole thing." And this became really a kind of source of his motivation, you know, evil though it may be, really honest, you know. You can be evil, but you can be honest. Of course, it's meant as an entertainment, but when you're inside something for that amount of time, the philosophy does rub off on you. And I mean, again, I don't want to sound corny, but that whole analogy aspect that wars could be fought using strictly non-human entities in order to display certain ideas or desires or needs, just seems to make a lot of sense. Because, of course, I didn't understand it at first. But the beautiful, simple idea is that these two factions try and destroy each other every week, but it's really inconsequential because they can reassemble, you know, which people really can't. To a certain extent. So in that way, the idea is beautiful. It's like sports on another level, as an analogy, you know, as an analog for real war. I got behind that idea, and it appealed to me a lot because, I mean, that is the way war is kind of heading these days. The problem now is, of course, it's a bit one-sided. But if both sides, or either side, or all the sides had computer-operated weapons, or whatever you want to call them, well, a lot less people would get hurt. You see, the danger when you're an actor is to do what you're asking me to answer, to relate to your roles. I mean, that can be very dangerous. But nonetheless, I would have to say that Tarantulas, being a kind of personification of evil, but evil as a great job. You know, not evil as like he's not unhappy, which is the really sweet part. I mean, he's just so evil, but not really very good at it. And that gives the character a little bit more than two dimensions. And I mean, that's why I loved him so much. Well, I would have let him run things for a while, and then find out that he's incapable. I mean, that would have been nice, just to prove to him that, you know, you are better off as number two, because that wasn't really explored, or whatever way you want to describe it. I wish I'd seen a little bit more of that. But of course, it wasn't about him. I mean, I'm surprised that he's as well loved as a bad guy as he is. So I'm pretty happy. But yeah, if the show had been all about me, it would have been fantastic.